Hi,
Hi,
I'm Rick.
I'm Steve.
Welcome to Talks Back to the Preacher. And today we are going to talk about politics.
Yes, and how it pertains to religion and whether or not Jesus would be for the infusion of religion in politics and vice versa.
I don't really think we're talking about politics at all.
You don't think so?
Well, it's not I don't think it's politics. I think it's theology. I don't think that, one side or one party arguing with the other, that sounds like politics to me. Or the group of people getting together to decide public policy, which is what politics is about. You get together and you decide.
So that's, even when that happens within a church setting, with people who are either working for or with the church, that's still politics.
I think it's, the basic definition of what politics is, we think of it, we're in an election year.
Yes.
And we're in the middle of the heating up of the Republican presidential primaries.
Who's going to become the Republican nominee.
Right.
Right.
And so, on the one hand, there's the whole question of fiscal policy, which is like politics,
Right.
And then there's social and religious policy.
Right. Which the government sometimes shapes because of their policies, because of laws and implementation of laws and enforcement.
So the question that you brought up is this whole issue of how much would Jesus be involved in, and how much did Jesus or does God care about public policy and politics? And there's not one answer on this. There's a huge spectrum.
Right.
Gigantic spectrum among...
A lot of people read the same text and come to different conclusions.
Because on the one hand, Jesus says, look, the kingdom I'm building is not of this earth. It's not about politics. It's not about public policy. It's not about anything that you can see. And on the other hand, the prophets and Jesus and lots of texts in the Bible are very insistent that people be involved in the real world with caring for the poor and with doing good things and blah 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 blah. So there's no, it's not clear cut at all.
But it's become especially heated in the last 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month, because one of the Republican candidates is especially religious, wears his religion on his sleeve.
Yes.
And is very opinionated.
Yes.
Much to the delight of some people and the chagrin of others.
Right. Right.
So there are a wide variety of different things being discussed, a lot of opinions flying around.
With the whole issue of, on the one hand, these are my religious beliefs, which in America, the idea is that the state and the church, religion, institutional religion, are not to be mixed in terms of public policy and politics. And on the other hand, like you said, it's always going to be... the way people believe theologically and religiously is always going to have an impact on what happens in the public sector of politics.
Well, and I think if you want to go back to Founding Fathers, because a lot of people do when they're talking about politics, trying to get back to the original meaning, doesn't that sound familiar? One of the things that keeps on coming up is that there was a strong effort very early on to really keep some separation between church and state, not only for the benefit of the state and people under the state, but for the church as well. They corrupt each other, theoretically. At least that was the saying. And to the point where decisions were made fairly early on that we still adhere to, where as an entity, a private entity, churches aren't even taxed.
Right.
The government doesn't even want money from churches.
Right.
That means there's a pretty strong separation, I would say. But beyond that, if somebody is very spiritual and very fervent in their belief, even if they're, whether it be strongly religious or spiritual or whatever term you want to put on it, or the opposite of that, whatever the opposite would be, or anywhere on the spectrum, wide three-dimensional spectrum, you're going to bring part of your personality, including your religion, including who you are as a deep person. You would hope that person would bring that to the office. Anything less would be fake.
Well, and Nixon... Richard Nixon's official religious affiliation was that he was a Quaker. Right. And that totally bore out in the way he behaved. He was very...
As so many public pronouncements of faith tend to be...
well, and it is interesting, too, in this particular process, because that question of what religious convictions is somebody going to bring? How will that impact the way they vote or the way they shape policy? The fact that Mitt Romney, who has been the front runner for the Republican Party, is a Mormon, is like a big deal.
Sure.
And then the fact that Rick Santorum is an avid Christian who is also a Catholic,
Yes.
is a big deal.
It is.
Because then there's the whole question of the gigantic part of the Republican Party, which is evangelical, which is in some ways distrustful of Mormons and Catholics.
Exactly.
And yet here's where,
It's interesting to see how it works out.
yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting to reflect on that when you think about the one thing that comes to my mind when I think of Jesus and what he said in the Bible directly about maybe politics, and there are probably many other passages I'm not thinking of, but the one that springs to my mind is give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. So to me, that passage says, you have a foot in both worlds. You're here. It's important. You don't turn your back on society and government and politics and all that stuff, but there is a distinction between the two.
Yeah.
And an important one to be made,
Yeah.
I would say. And I think, I would like to think in absolutes and ideal worlds, there would be a strong separation between the two, because I do think they tend to pollute each other. But, what do I know?
You know a lot. You're special.
Oh, good.
Absolutely you are.
Well, I'm glad I bring that to the table.
We don't have any conclusions, obviously.
No, like every time.
But I do think that there's something significant. For me, that part of the question to ask is, how healthy or unhealthy is it for a particular candidate or for a particular person who wants a certain amount of power? How healthy or unhealthy is it for that person to bring a strongly religious viewpoint to what she or he is trying to
Well, especially when they're responsible for making policies that will govern people of varying faiths.
Right.
And they all have rights, and they all have a right to their own faith and be able to live their lives. It's a conundrum. There is no perfect answer. And I think that's where the gold is in the struggle, trying to figure out where the answers are in the mix of all the muddiness. So, as it is with life and politics and religion and spirituality and relationship with God and others and love and all those things.
Yeah. Write that down. That was it.
If you have any other perspectives, bring it to the table.
Jump in.
We'd love to hear from you.
Hope this helps the mill as you consider your own stuff.
Get involved. We'd love to hear from you.
Good.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
So.